Hey there! Are you ready for lesson 5? Guys, this time we'll be learning how to make use of the speed shutter and exposure time. We are going to find different speeds depending on the camera we are using, obviously. So, first of all, take your camera and check out the range of speed in them. As you can see here in the whiteboard, this camera offers all these speeds, which go from 1 divided 4000 to other speeds like 1 second to seconds. The maximum is 30 or 20 seconds, depending on the camera. And we can also find the bulb option. The shutter speed is the time the shutter takes to open or close, so we can open it faster or slower. In last session, we were talking about a noise made by the camera when taking a picture, remember it? Well, it's related to this movement of the shutter. Thus, if we want to freeze the scene and get a static image, then we are going to use a faster speed. On the contrary, if we are taking a picture of something in movement or we are holding the camera when working with a slower speed, that movement is going to be reflected on the image. It isn't the same shooting a race car than a person walking in the street, right? So, speed will depend on what we are taking a picture of. However, we could set a reference limit at around 125 or 60. Some cameras refer to the speed as 1 divided by the fraction, while others use only a fraction. The number 1 here stands for 1 second divided any number. So guys, what else do we need to know? Let's say we set some parameters and adjust the exposure method to 0. When shifting from one speed to a faster one, we'll be doubling it, while moving to slower speed means reducing it by a half. Let's say we set 125 and then change to 250. What happens? The shutter will open and close faster, letting less light come into the camera. So, the faster we set the speed, the lesser amount of light will be reaching it, which lets us get frozen images. Now, if we move from 125 to 60, we'll be doubling the amount of light. And it also happens when moving from 60 to 30, again and again. What we are doing here is shifting to slower speeds, and these reflect certain movement in our image, like a fading or any other effect we fancy. Thus, when we are working with the camera and want to adjust the ISO or the aperture, we'll also need to pay attention to the speed, so that we can avoid blurred images, because we don't want to ruin it, right? It's also important to know that every time we change the speed, we are moving one step back or forwards. So guys, if we change the speed from 125 to 60, we are going to add 1 point of light. And from 125, for example, to 30, in this case, we're going to double the amount of light, as you can see in here. These smaller marks over here, you see between +1 and +2, refer to 1/3 of light. What does it mean? Okay, for instance, between 125 and 160, there's other smaller speed intervals, such as 100 or 180. This option is really useful because it lets us change the speed gradually and tweak it, depending on what we need. Obviously, the speed we are going to use will depend on the existing light. Don't forget to be particularly careful with the slower speeds. Let's consider the following example. Say we want to use a really fast speed to freeze a movement, but we are indoors. As there's no enough light, it's better not to use faster speeds. But you'll understand it with some practical examples, don't worry. Another important thing is the stabilizer when working with speeds under the limits we said before. This tool, the stabilizer, which is called IS in Canon and VR in Nikon, is going to help us reduce the camera shake. This tool is very useful when working with a slow speed. It reduces the possibilities of getting a blurred image. If the camera comes with the stabilizer turning on, since it's really useful for slow speeds. But, very important, if we are working with a tripod and a short exposure time, I recommend you to turn it off. It's much better. We aren't using a tripod in this course because, as I said, it's only necessary for slow speeds, such as 1 second, 2 seconds, or even bulb option. If you remember this option, lets us take photos beyond the minimum speed set in our camera. Guys, I know this is difficult stuff, so don't worry because we are not going to talk about it in this course. Now it's time to do some practical exercises. With them, we are going to learn to control the motion and use really cool effects. Let's do this first exercise to start learning how the movement works. Here I have this tasty apple and this fish tank. What I'm going to do now is throw in the apple into the fish tank and try to freeze the water motion. Don't worry if the image is blurred at the beginning. We just need to understand what happens with the scene light and what parameters we need to adjust to get a fully frozen scene. First, I'm going to take a photo by setting ISO at 100 and using an open aperture. Remember that in order to freeze the image, we need a fast shutter speed, so that's why we are going to let a big amount of light reach the camera. With these settings, the speed is automatically adjusted to 1/100. This means that when I throw the apple to the water, the motion is going to be reflected on the image. So, what can we do to get a faster shutter speed? As the aperture is already open, we are going to blow ISO up. So, we can move from ISO 100 to ISO 200, which is going to double the light as well as the exposure time. So, if we had set before ISO at 100, and we got a speed at 100 as well, with this change we are getting 200 for speed. So, if we keep doubling ISO, we'll be doubling the speed as well. So, let's set ISO at 6400, for example. We can see that if we adjust the exposure meta by increasing the speed, we're going to get the highest speed, which is 4000. But this won't be necessary, so let's reduce ISO to 3200, which is also a speed of 3200. Guys, we are going to do now some exercises to master the image motion. I recommend you to look for situations with objects in movement, for example, people walking, birds, water, bikes. In the first place, we're going to take a picture of trying to get a frozen motion, and in this case, we'll be using fast speeds. Remember that limit was around 125. So, for now, we are going to work with faster speeds to see what happens with the scene. Don't forget that when using a fast speed, we aren't letting a big amount of light come through the camera. So, although we work with an open aperture, I recommend using a 5.6. Probably you'll need to increase ISO to work with fast speeds, especially working in a shady setting. don't need to do that. Let's do these two exercises, one practicing with a faster speed, which I'm going to take a picture of the water, and another with slower speed, reducing it under the limit. Don't forget that we are not using a tripod, so I need a speed that doesn't blur the image. For example, we can use here around 80 or 60. As we are letting more light inside the camera, we are going to change the ISO and the aperture. In this case, we can set the ISO at 100. We are going to change the diaphragm depending on the slow speed we set. Look at these photos, they are great, right? Let's do this funny exercise called panning. Why? Since we are going to pan the scene from left to right, working with different speeds. And how are we going to reflect the motion in the image? Pretty easy. Remember that the speed limit is around 1 divided 125 and 1 divided 60. So we are going to work under this limit, like 1 divided 100 or divided 80 or even a slower speed. What we need to do is select the object in movement we want to take a photo of. For example, let's take a car, a motorbike, anything you want. And what we are going to do now is follow the movement of the object with the camera. And at the same time, we are going to shoot so that the image of the object we get is clear enough while we try to capture the motion of the background. It's crucial we move at the same speed of the object. This is, for example, if it's a motorbike or a car, which drive faster, our speed's going to be higher as well. And if we are shooting a person or a bike, which have a slower motion, then we also move slower. Let's start with the speed at 1 divided 125. Try to take a picture keeping the camera in a static position to check if the motion is reflected on the image. Then let us slow down the speed to 1 divided 100 or 80. We are going to start moving once the motion appears in the image. So we are going to keep on reducing the speed until we get a motion, and then it's our time to start following the object's motion. Don't worry if you can't capture the motion the first time, it's normal. Take all the shots you need until you get it. Now it's your turn. Let's have fun and try different objects. See you soon.